Welcome to Civic Warriors, brought to you by Witham. On this podcast, we bring the conversation to you, sharing engaging stories that motivate and build consensus in the nonprofit community. This podcast is about the innovators, the leaders on the front line of adversity, guiding lights in the nonprofit industry affecting change. And through their stories, we can all join forces to become Civic Warriors. Hey, Warriors. Welcome to today's episode of Civic Warriors, brought to you by Witham. I'm your host, Brad Caruso, leader of Witham's not-for-profit practice. So today we're going to talk about a very important and timely topic around equal representation. Our guest today is Caitlin Newman, the Director of Development at She Should Run. She Should Run is a nonpartisan nonprofit working to drastically increase the number of women considering a run for public office. She brings more than a decade of experience in women's studies and grassroots community organizing to her role leading fundraising efforts for the organization. Caitlin hails from Connecticut, where she resides with her partner. And a trained actor, she enjoys spending her free time practicing her craft and working in various local theater productions. So Caitlin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brad. Pleasure to be here today.
So where I'd love to start off is tell our listeners a little bit more about She Should Run, the mission, and really why you exist.
To start, I think I'd want to ground it a little bit in how I came to She Should Run, because I think that as an organization that serves women, that is staffed 100% by women, it's really an opportunity to say, look, my story is connected to our really heartfelt mission to ensure that more women have the opportunity to explore their leadership potential. And for someone like me, who I grew up in a household of women, I grew up the middle child of two sisters. I also have a 14-year-old sister, and I'm learning so much from her about what future leadership will look like. My mother comes from a family of 5 sisters and has been a beverage server at a casino for the last 30 years. And so I grew up embedded in this network of women who were really leading in their communities, taking care of their homes, often single-handedly. And so I saw firsthand the stakes that exist for women and the ways in which women can and can make a contribution to the important conversations that are happening in policy, but certainly in everyday life in our communities. And so as someone coming out of and working within the anti-violence movement, working within the labor movement, I really saw this opportunity to get on the front end of being able to enact change in all the places where decisions get made. And that what we're really missing, and this is the heart of She Should Run's analysis, is we're missing the unique contributions of women in leadership that, as I just said, we all know and see every day in our real lives. And so our work at She Should Run is focused on making sure that we build a strong bench of leaders who are fired up and ready to run for office. And I want to be really specific here, Brad, because a lot of the work that happens in the world, and certainly so many of the conversations we have with really near and dear partners, we talk about the candidate a lot. And we're excited about those candidates who are on the ballot, right? We're excited to see women on the ballot and to support their campaigns and to volunteer on their campaigns and give the votes and dollars and support that those women need. The reality is that the women that are running in 2024 started their journey years ago. Right? We know for a fact through research that we've done at She Should Run that less than 2% of women in the United States wake up with a dream to run for office one day, right? In fact, there's 24.4 million American women who may never think about running for office. And these are women who are leading in our communities, who are civically engaged, who are in homes, workplaces, places of worship, schools especially. And we ask the question, how do we move them to a place of action and get them to sincerely think about running? And so we are at the top of the funnel, right? We're here to say, there is a place for you if you're not ready to run, but you want to explore. If you have a fire in your belly about something that, an issue or a cause that is affecting your life or the life of the people you love, then we want to be here for you as a place to explore that aspiration and to make it a little bit easier, to normalize it, and a little bit more accessible. So I think that that's truly the heart of our work, is diversifying thought, engagement, strengthening the health of local, state, national government systems by actually saying, let's build a bench of leaders. And you opened the call by saying it's timely. I mean, the truth is that the women we serve may not run until 2028, and that's the point of the work. And they may not run until 2032. Our research also tells us that it takes an average of 4 years for women to make the decision and ultimately put their name on a ballot. And so where are they going, in that time? Where are they engaging in a process of discovery? That's where She Should Run sits and what we're really committed to.
Yeah, and certainly a lot to continue to go through on that. When I think about the topic, and even a lot of our listeners are in the nonprofit industry, and the nonprofit industry in general is predominantly run by women. I mean, if you look at a lot of the major organizations, I mean, I'd say definitely more than half my client base it's a woman CEO. And listen, they're making change they are real civic warriors. I mean, I think it goes a long way. And I'm sure there's a lot of drivers that you're going to get into about, why someone would or wouldn't run for office, why one would or wouldn't. And two, consistent with you, I have a sister and a brother, but my mom has 3 sisters and my dad has 3 sisters. So
you're like surrounded by these women. And I get, the question again comes back to, how do we tap the talent pool that we know exists? I mean, you mentioned the nonprofit sector again, in 2022, on the heels of the pandemic, in which She Should Run was able to serve more women than ever with our virtual programming, we asked this question of what are those motivators? And what we found was that civic engagement is the real gateway, is the connective tissue to being able to convince a woman to run. But, listening to your one of the last podcasts you did, this question of how can we get involved? So many of us who are in social services, who are working the nonprofit sector, I myself have been in this work, for the last 15 years. We feel like that is out of reach. We may be able to, become a senior leader in an organization. We may be an active volunteer at a nonprofit. We may even join a nonprofit board. But this idea of running for office, that's something for someone else, right? That's not something for me. I often joke with my colleagues, I ran a campaign successfully. I ran for senior class president. When I was 17, it was quite the coup. And, so I actually have early leadership experiences. If you ask me today, would I run for office? I'm still a maybe, right? I have a lot of fears and concerns about that level of visibility. How will it fit into my life? How will it fit into my goals? Do I have what it takes? And so I think there's a lot of work around self-perception and eradicating those messages that we as women absorb in the world about our own capabilities. But then I also think that there's this opportunity to create an infrastructure, to create an ecosystem of encouragement, which we call multipliers at She Should Run. And that we don't just have to say, you know what, it's not going to happen in this generation, right? We're not going to see it. Women are still only 30% of all elected offices, and the percentage of women of color within that 30% is even more dismally, smaller than that. So again, we're not tapping the full talent pool of women's potential, for our government, for a healthier democracy, right? We know that policymaking is stronger when you have a diverse set of perspectives. So it's been really interesting to see that, sort of even women in leadership, or those of us who had those early foundational experiences, are not yet quite ready to commit to that next step. And so we're here to make that an easier transition.
Yeah, I love that. And it sounds like a lot of what you teach and a lot of the skills are also leadership, right? I think leadership is a big part of public office, and it's all about giving people the opportunity to have those leadership positions. So my thought process too, just going into this discussion, is I imagine a barrier to entry too is potentially, many women may not have been in those leadership positions, or may not have been given those leadership positions, or had the opportunity to have them, which also could be a barrier to, I am going to lead a bunch of, if you're going to be in public office, you're leading your constituency. I mean, that's a daunting task if you haven't been exposed to it or had the opportunity. So it's important.
Yeah. That point, Brad, sort of raises the question of what qualifies a woman to lead. And one of the things that we always say at She Should Run, that if you care, you're qualified. Because the truth is, right, there is a lot of dissatisfaction and disillusionment in our government already. We're seeing record rates of polarization. I think that there's a lot of dysfunction that folks are aware of, regardless of where you stand, right? I mean, She Should Run's a nonpartisan organization, so we chat with women across the spectrum. And the common thread that we see is my needs are not represented. My interests are not considered. And so, what we also saw show up in the research is that, in addition to sort of pre-existing civic engagement, that we can reach women when we connect the dots between issue advocacy and the issues that they care about, and then say one way you can get to that is through policy making. It doesn't, we need to sort of demystify. We don't have to have the mystique of it. I had mentioned that, I started my own career in the anti-violence movement, working in solidarity with amazing organizations that were survivor-led, women who had oftentimes experienced unspeakable trauma, and, combating sexual violence, state violence, especially against women of color, especially against Black women. And what was so powerful about those movements is the ability to speak truth to power, have the lived experience be validated through, seeing it, advocating for policy because you know what's best. Like, we have to believe that women have the wisdom that will ultimately yield better outcomes for our lives. And yet I also experienced this burnout because I knew that the potential was there. I knew the talent was there. I knew the analyses were on point. I wasn't seeing that translate into more women on the ballot. I wasn't seeing that necessarily translate into policy outcomes or government funding that really, bolstered these movements to end violence against women. And so I got really burnt out. And so I came to She Should Run because I said, look, there's an opportunity here to change the tide. We have to be on the front end. We have to be proactive. We have to be long game about building this bench of leaders because we're just not seeing this energy and power and wisdom translate into elected officials yet. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that we have not seen these moments. I think about 2018 when I first joined the team, where you have these amazing examples of women who are leading. And frankly, women are as likely to win as men. Certainly, sometimes the election is harder and there's more scrutiny. But it's that women aren't running at the same rates as men. And then this piece about the multiplier is that women are not asked at the same rates as men, right? They're not encouraged. So when you say, a lot of women haven't even been in those leadership roles yet, that's systemic. And so what can we do to create a movement of multipliers who are making it a priority in their everyday lives or in their positions of power to, pull a woman up behind them and inspire her to take those first steps to run?
Yeah, I love that. And I think, consistency is so important. You can't just do something once and you need a pipeline. It can't just be, okay, 1-to-1, like, okay, we're coaching one person and that's going to work out. Like, you need a pipeline of 1,000 so you get 2. And, I don't know what the statistics show for you, but my guess is that's what, and I know that's how it is, running a firm. It's, you need 1,000 just to generate 5 that are going to be successful at it. I guess where I'm curious is, do you think a barrier to entry is just that they have been so male dominated, or the right motivator hasn't come up to push them?
Yeah. And I think the first thing that's important to say is that women are not a monolith. And so every woman has had a different experience of what that barrier might look like. And so certainly we have met women who are operating in an environment or in a community where they're sort of like the good old boy club, right? That makes it really hard to break through and be considered as that, like, we're going to champion you, put our resources behind you, and ultimately get you on the ballot. I also think, though, that there's, and this is why I mentioned it's like systemic, is there's like the normalization of women. There's that saying of like, if you can see it, you can be it. So certainly representation is important just by like role modeling, right? And creating and normalizing. But beyond that, I think the reason why She Should Run's signature curriculum has been so successful is that we recognize that women are very busy, right? Because women bear the brunt of the issues that many Americans are facing right now. When we think about combating racism, when we think about a struggling economy, when we think about gun violence, regardless of where you stand, right? That, like, we know that these are issues that affect our communities and our lives, education, all of those, reproductive health, right? Whatever the issue is, there's a specific impact that it has on women that also decreases their capacity to participate fully. And I think that what we try to do is to say, look, that's okay. We know the pressures that you're facing. We know that you're busy. We know that you're raising children. We know that you're, working, maybe 2 jobs. How can we create low barrier, accessible, flexible, free, because our signature curriculum is entirely free, to the women we serve, that lets you dip your toe in and create a custom journey of exploration where you can really start to like just put the building blocks in place, because there will come a time when it makes sense for you, right? There will come a time when you can match your purpose with the way that you spend your time. Two stories that sort of come to mind, just to like make this really concrete. I'll share with you a little bit of women that from my own life that is not yet ready to run and has very limited capacity to do so. My older sister, she's actually in the world of business. She's like a supply chain logistics expert. She works for a major multinational company and leads a team of people. She has 3 small children. She has a 1-year-old, a 5-year-old, and an 8-year-old. I absolutely love my nibblings. They take a lot of time. They take a lot of energy, right? And she volunteers, with her son's Boy Scout troop. She goes to her local farmers market. She even has started attending local meetings for her board of selectmen, which, look, it's literally called board of selectmen, Brad. So again, when you talk about the intangible barriers that exist for women, I mean, let's be real, right? Like, it's called board of selectmen. And she started attending meetings in her town because it's an aging population in her town. And so sometimes the way that policy around like the education budget, for example, gets rolls out is not meeting the needs of folks with children, because, there's sort of a contentious debate that happens in her town around the education budget. And so she said to me one day, I went to this meeting and I felt like no one was, we have a huge community of young families in our town, and like literally no one on the board of selectmen is representing that interest. And so, of course, you can't be related to me without me saying, well, have you ever thought about running for office?
Right.
And like her response, and we continue to talk about it. I may have even called her this morning to be like, I'm going on this podcast and I'm going to tell everyone about this to get her permission. And of course, even that moment, she was like, I'm so touched that you would, think of me in this way. But every time she brings it up, I'm saying to her, like, why don't you run? Why don't you run? And like the reason is right now, simply time. She has what it takes. She has the organizational skills. She has the certainly the support of her family and her friends. And even someone like her, she's saying, not now, not now, not now. And so, because I want to be present, and so I often say, like, well, maybe when Violet, my 1-year-old niece, maybe when Violet goes off to kindergarten and you don't have staggering daycare bills anymore, maybe that can be something that you decide to do. And so that's an example, I think, of a woman in sort of the earliest stages of her journey who's saying, how do I start to take action on an issue that's affecting me and my family? And I see there's an opportunity, there's someone missing in my community who's making decisions, in this particular room. How do we get her to a place of running? So she's not saying no now, right? Before it wasn't even in her purview. So we've achieved the sort of first objective of She Should Run, which is to normalize. Now we're in this sort of flexible space of how do we make time? How do you continue to learn, right? She's a donor to the organization. She follows us on social. So she's in the conversation. And eventually, I truly believe that, and perhaps with me as her campaign manager, she will get to that place of being able to get on the ballot for her board of selectmen. So that's a really personal story, but I think we all have women in our life that we can think of who we're clear on what their barriers are because we know them so well. How do we help them overcome those barriers? There's a second story I want to share of a woman who's gone through the She Should Run programming. And this is an amazing young woman who is a Latina educator. And she was working as a teaching assistant in a low-income community in an elementary school. And I believe in an elementary school. I don't know the level, but she was a teaching assistant. And she experienced gun violence in the classroom very acutely. A student brought a weapon into the space. And so on the heels of that, had paralyzing trauma, understandably so, and felt very acutely depressed about what her next steps would be. And she had a friend who had not run for office herself, was connected with She Should Run, knew about us. We were in the ether for her. Again, we had sort of normalized the conversation in her own life. And so she said, I think you should check out this group. I feel like there's something for you here that could maybe relight that spark that you lost in this devastating incident. And she convinced her to register for one of our issues webinars, which happened to bring together community experts on the issue of ending gun violence in communities and connecting that to here's the actions you can take in policy. Here's how you can be an advocate. Again, here's how you can become civically engaged on this thing that's so important to you on the pathway to maybe thinking about running. And so through attending that She Should Run program, she actually ended up launching, she spoke to her county government, and she ended up launching basically a community safety committee that hadn't existed before. And that is now actively creating, recommendations and exploring what it would mean to end this particular kind of violence and other forms of public safety, to support other forms of public safety in her community. She also has recently joined our community council as a way to pay it forward and say, look, here was my journey from a place of disillusionment and fear to a place of empowerment and action. How can we re-engineer that for other women who are in my same circumstance? And so I think that's a great example of a woman who didn't just dip her toe in, which is totally fine if that's where you're at, but then who then kind of went deeper with us and went through this really thoughtful, deliberative process to ultimately create, her own policymaking role, which I think is so very cool. And then is now showing up as a multiplier for other women.
Yeah, those are great stories to ground both how you help as well as the importance of kind of starting small to some degree, or starting with something that you're personally connected to, and starting with something that resonates with you. So, running for local office, or running where your kids go to school, running for school board, running for things like that. Because obviously, I mean, from my perspective, equal representation is absolutely needed, because you need diversity in thought without question.
Well, question for you, because I not to put you on the spot, Brad, but I do kind of, if I could turn the tables with your permission, I would love to hear, as I was sharing, did you have any specific women or women in your own life come up, and what do you think it will take for her to start to take first steps? Yeah.
So interestingly enough, I appreciate that question. I love it. So I have two small kids. I have a 5 and a 7-year-old. I've talked to my wife about this. My wife is, her position is like, I never want to like be in front of like a large group of people and like have to deal with like, she wants to avoid it. But my son's best friend, his mom, we've been talking to her, we hang out a lot, have a lot of conversations, and she was not sure about getting into coaching, because she's like, oh, I don't know if I should, like I'm a little scared of it. And I'm like, come on, like I'll coach with you. And then, so she started, we coached together, kids flag football, and, started out that way. And she's like, I don't know if I can call play. I'm like, you're going to call play, just call plays. Like, it's fine. Like, they're a bunch of 5-year-olds, they're a bunch of 6-year-olds. Like, where's the problem? And she's like, what if I screw it up? I'm like, what if I screw it up? You think I know what I'm doing? I'm an accountant, for God's sakes.
The fake it till you make it is really important.
100%. It's put one foot in front of the other. Fake it till you make it. 90% of life is showing up. That's been my philosophy forever.
Yeah.
And now she's doing it. And now we're coaching the second season right now. Now she's calling all the plays. Now she's like basically the team advocate. She's doing it way better than I ever would have. And she's like communicating with everybody timely. And I think the parents appreciate it more, because she's out there kind of putting herself on the line to coach these kids. And I know that's not a political example, but from a leadership perspective, I resonate with your stories to say that's how that's how I view it. How you start small, and it's encouragement. So I'm constantly encouraging her to say, hey, just keep doing it. Like, you're doing a great job, and honestly, you are doing it better. As much as you don't think you're doing it better than I would have, and you're resonating with everybody, and the kids love it. And the coolest part is, like you said, when you think about how she brought her own experiences and like just being more creative than I would ever be. Her playbook was color coded, and she started naming the plays, and I was like, this is awesome. It's like
there's a fun debate out there, which I think is important, because women are not a monolith. There's a fun debate of like, do women make better leaders or not? And and I think She Should Run's perspective is, look, there's a lot of our partners in the field. Research I can think of from like the Center for American Women in Politics or the Barbara Lee Family Foundation that does show that women leaders are at the very least more collaborative and sort of like also just make like really good project managers, right? As you described, the sort of, and again, that's not everyone's experience necessarily. I myself am a neurodivergent leader. And so as someone with ADHD, like, I don't know that I'd have the color-coded, a more of a relational leader, right? Again, like women bring lots of different experiences to the table, but it sounds like that sort of coaching, I love this example because there, we see coaches in communities across the nation, and it's a perfect way. And I also think sports, right? Let's be real. Sports has been a very male dominated field for a long time. And so stepping into that space, even at the municipal level, and like finding your way and finding your voice and doing, like, excuse my French, but a damn good job at it. It sounds like is characteristic of the hundreds of thousands of women that we've seen interact with our content, who are saying, oh, like, there's something here for me. Brad, you're also kind of spurring for me something that I think your listeners would be really interested to hear, which is that so many of the people that we see, that we interact with, and women that we serve, are coming out of corporate environments. And I think we found like our partners within that world are really powerful multipliers, because also the challenges you're probably seeing perhaps at Witham or in other places with the challenges that women experience in the workplace as well, whether it's a coaching environment, whether that's like a boardroom, really mirror the challenges of or the barriers of why women don't want to enter public office or run for office to begin with. And so I just want to make a note. I know, and as we think about sort of the responsibilities that we've identified here, or the opportunities rather, we all have to be multipliers, I think that institutions are also a really key part of this conversation. The most favorite part of my job day to day is being able to partner with corporations, companies, workplaces that see that connectivity. They know that folks are hungry for that type of engagement and civic action. I remember I was hearing when you speak with Maria Spina from PSEG Foundation, and she was kind of saying, look, we as this foundation are committed to, we understand that our constituents are calling on us for to build healthy communities alongside of them. And as a side note, I thought it would be fun for you all to know that PSEG was an original funder of She Should Run, and helped us launch our incubator program right after the 2016 election. And so I think about organizations like PSEG who are seeing that connectivity, who understand that corporate leadership is also where this kind of encouragement can occur. And so She Should Run's programs, in addition to facilitating these really thoughtful one-on-one interactions with women, we go into corporate offices and conduct employee engagement workshops. We run co-created campaigns with large national and multinational companies who have platforms that are speaking to women. And so I think that's what makes us really unique as a nonprofit. And I would encourage, other nonprofits who are listening to say, beyond financial contributions, though certainly we're a 501c3, I'm a director of development, so I understand firsthand what sustainability is in those terms, but also recognizing that our mission is not apart from the people who are giving to us or the people who are listening today, but that actually there are women who are listening to this podcast right now who are our target audience. And there are allies and people of all genders who are listening to this podcast right now who are in positions or in institutions that can make a really big dent on our path to seeing more women actively step into the fray. So it just feels really important to also say that outside of the sort of one-on-one, there's this, like you mentioned, like getting to scale through the, one more woman we're able to connect with.
Yeah, and you bring up a lot of super important topics that I think are relevant here. And I have some opinions on how to do things the right way, but I really want to hear your opinion on this. So, a lot of things we are talking about is this concept of encouragement, this concept of how others help. I mean, yeah. How do you feel just in both running the organization you run, as well as just your experiences? How does everyone become a part of this, solution of equal representation, or how does everyone contribute to that? Both on the, you mentioned the, charitable side, right? I mean,
Yeah.
PSNG funds a lot of very important issues and organizations
Yeah.
that it's important. So, what is your opinion on that when it comes to how others can be a part of this solution for equal representation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on it a little bit with my question for you, sharing about
100%.
your family friend, right? I think fundamentally talking about it, and I realize, by the way, that it doesn't sound like a revolutionary thing, but trust me, it is.
It is,
right? Because we like I said, there's a lot of women out there and people in their lives who aren't connecting the dots to thinking about running. And this notion that men are, much more likely to be asked. The last I checked, I think the research, there's this amazing scholar, Jennifer Lawless, and I think it was something like men are 15 times more likely to be asked. I mean, it was like this astronomical,
oh, geez.
And there was a recent study that just came out this week that showed that like over 50% of men held leadership positions as youth, and that it was much smaller for women, right? So again, our opportunity within our everyday lives to make the conversation normal, to ask the women in your life to run. You may get, I want to prepare folks, if you ask a woman in your life to run, you may get a reaction that you're not expecting. We used to have this tool on our website, and I was in this book club when I lived in Austin, and I had an amazing educator. She was a bilingual curriculum expert. And I was like, she should run for school board. And so I used our tool on our website, and I sent her an email that said, I think you should run. Here's why. And the next time I saw her at our book club, she said, Caitlin, I got the weirdest email from you. And I thought it was spam because you were asking me to run for office. And I said, that was not spam. That was actually like a sincere, I wasn't making it up, And so just to say that if the first step is having the conversation, the woman that you think should run, she may not even be expecting it. It's not in her purview. And so there's a variety of reactions that you can get when you start having that conversation. But the more you sort of, like in marketing, right? The more you bring it up, the more touch points you have, the more you see it come to life for that person. So that's really foundational. And it's an important part of She Should Run strategy. I think institutionally, as I had mentioned, there's all of these ways in which we see, and the research bears this out as well, tapping into existing networks of women or places and spaces where women gather makes it more likely that women will then take the first steps and actively consider. And so I think that there are a lot of employers, there are a lot of faith leaders, there are, a lot of folks who are already in those positions of power who have a vantage point of who they're working with or who they're supporting that should also be thinking about this. And so certainly connecting them to our programs or having them, we have some really accessible content. We have something called the Starter Kit, for example, where you just really start to learn, how does government work? We have the Public Office Profile Suite, which is I think I'm interested in school board. What does that look like? Can I hear from other women who've run from school board to understand that campaign experience and what the responsibilities are of that position? So I think that that's the other piece. And then this finally, the activation, the multiplication. Finally, and I'd be remiss not to say this, but it is bringing financial resources to bear on this kind of work. The truth is, in the Women's Philanthropy Institute at Indiana University, they put out this really powerful Women and Girls Index every few years. And it talks about, it sort of evaluates where is money flowing within the philanthropic sector. And the truth is that to organizations like She Should Run, who exclusively serve women and girls, right? Certainly we know that lots of social services agencies and organizations serve women and girls. But for organizations like ours, that is our exclusive mission, we comprise and receive less than 2% of charitable giving in the sector. And so that 2%, I think it's 1.9% now, that 1.9% is being spread across all of, I started saying across the anti-violence movement, right? When we're looking at women in labor issues, when we're looking at women in government. And so the percentage that organizations like She Should Run get as we're building these national pipelines is very small. And so I think there is an opportunity for folks to say, okay, how do we invest in long game, long-term strategies that truly move the needle on the front end. Because as I had started with, if we don't start doing this now, we're not going to have the candidate pool we need in 2028 and certainly in 2032 and certainly when my 14-year-old sister is ready to run for president one day.
Right.
Like that's not going to happen, right? So I think that that's the real crisis. And so if folks leave with one takeaway around how they can be a part of this process, it's that it takes a lot longer than you think to get a woman there. And so you can be a part of starting that process and expediting that process through your support, engagement, and through your financial investment.
Yeah, without question. And I think it's one thing to say you're going to do something. It's another thing to act on it. And it's entirely another thing to put your money where it is. And, and it also is going to take people in positions that have the piggy bank to move that 2%. and the reality is, you probably, a lot of those people say things publicly, but where do they send the money?
Yeah.
I think we can all read between the lines on that one. So,
well, and look, even the most well-intentioned, I want to honor and say, like, we have, in the world of philanthropy and certainly outside of it, we have some amazing donors who are actively giving to women's campaigns right now. And we celebrate that. We support that. And if you want to see more women candidates, just statistically, our research is telling us like we're stagnant. So, you have to largely stagnant. And so I think that I would encourage folks who maybe are political donors and care about that, right? And or PACs, 501c4s who understand what it's like to lean into the candidate to say, well, how do we make more of those? Right. What do we need to get, to fill the ballot? So that also we have women with diverse perspectives among women, right? Who are bringing their lived experience and can have a really healthy democratic debate around what's the best direction for their community to go in. And so I think we're seeking a plurality of women's voices. And there's an opportunity for folks who are already giving in the political space to say, I'm going to do, I want that short-term win because I want to, there's a great representative, that I think is worthy of support, but I'm also going to put something here that pays it forward and continues to build pipeline.
Love it. Yeah. No, super important. And I think it's incumbent upon everyone to, participate in each one of those verticals as far as encouraging, someone to participate, as far as donating on both the campaign level as well as to an organization like She Should Run that's helping encourage people. And then it's all lead by example. Well, Caitlin, thank you so much for being on the show. This was such an engaging conversation.
Yeah.
Your energy is just phenomenal. You're going to start your own podcast soon. I can probably, and you should if you haven't already thought about it.
No, thank you. I appreciate all of the questions, and obviously, I've been at She Should Run for 5 years, so this is something that I've really dedicated this part of my career to, and I believe very strongly in uplifting women's voices, and that starts with me practicing and using my own. So grateful for the opportunity today and to meet you, Brad.
Love it. And Warriors, thank you for listening. And, just remember, anyone should consider running for public office. Everyone should consider it. You should encourage your friends. You should encourage the mothers in your town to run for local office. Or if you have someone that's looking to run on a grander scale, it's so important. Encouraging people they can do it, and also using the resources that Caitlin shared with us today at sheshouldrun.org, and going out there and just doing the best we can. So we appreciate everyone's time, and subscribe and meet us right back here for another episode of Witham Civic Warriors in the near future. Bye, everybody.